church because there was a new baby at home and all that stuff, and sickness going around, so they watched the live stream, a young family, because otherwise they would have been unable to do church. And so that's part of what we have in mind for it as well. So, yes, Jack?
I have a question on that, though.
Yeah.
When I watched it, I saw you,
Yeah.
I saw the screens, and then there was a section here with like, when you were gonna have live stream available.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get rid of it, no matter how hard I tried. Then all at once I have everything
The full
here.
screen?
And then it went back, then
Yeah.
I didn't have it again.
I've not spent a lot of time clicking around there. So what I would imagine is when you look at the live stream, the video, just like every video on your computer or on your phone or tablet, whatever you're looking at, there's usually an icon you can click with two arrows that are pointing out, or maybe it's a square that has a bigger square next to it. Whichever device you're using, it's going to be a little bit different. It's often in the upper right-hand corner. If you click on that, it tends to push it to the full screen, and then you wouldn't see all those things on the side. But actually, Jason Grant, your grandson, would be probably the better equipped person to answer the technical side of that. So,
All right. Thanks, Jason. All right, we're ready to get started with our noon town hall. Thanks, friends, for joining us here in the room in the sanctuary at St. Peter. It's a beautiful, beautiful day, isn't it? And hopefully you've already had a chance to be outside and enjoy some of that, and we'll have a chance later on today. Unfortunately, I'm going to be indoors here most of the day. We've got one-on-one check-ins with our confirmation students and their families that we line up this time of year. And so that's going to be awesome. I'll be checking in on faith development with some of our 8th graders, but it's going to chew up most of the afternoon. So later tonight, this weekend, we'll be able to get outside and enjoy it. So I have with me Brian Booth, our executive director. He and I will be kind of leading most of the discussion and the presentation here as well. Mike Graff is the chairman of our governing board, and he'll probably chime in and speak up from time to time as desired and as needed. We do have a wireless handheld microphone. We're going to ask when you do questions that you let us get that to you. And that's so not only everyone here can hear, but also on our live stream. And anyone on the live stream, if you want to submit questions or comments, you can do that through the comment box, and Jason, our tech guy, will bring that to us. So last time around, we had a great question from our live stream audience, and so we're glad you're here too. I'd like to start out with just a quick word of scripture that stood out to me as I was doing my Bible reading this morning. I journey through the Gospels and then just kind of go back and do it again, and that's my regular rhythm recently in particular. And so this morning I was reading through Luke chapter 17, and I want to read for you verses 7 through 10. Jesus here is talking about the nature of sin and our faith and the duties that God calls us to as we seek to follow Him. He starts out by talking about forgiving someone even if they've sinned against you 7 times, right? And His disciples are kind of just amazed that He would expect them to be that gracious and kind and forgiving when somebody has done wrong to them so much. And after that, He says, suppose one of you had a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. Would he say to the servant when he comes in from the field, come along now and sit down to eat? Would he not rather say, prepare my supper, get yourself ready, and wait on me while I eat and drink, and after that you may eat and drink? And the nature of the question, by the way, implies that the answer is yes to that one and no to the first question. Okay? Would he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? The implied answer to that is, well, no. So here's the point. So you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, you should say, we are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty. What stood out to me as I was reading that this morning is how Jesus calls us as we seek to do His will here on earth, and including in this context as the congregation gathered here in this place. Sometimes the temptation for us is to want attention and want people to approve of us, want to impress people, by how well we sing or how well we're dressed or by all the work that we do. And there's a place for that. When Jesus says, I think it's in Matthew 25, to those who have served the poor and the sick and the marginalized and the hospitalized and the imprisoned. Well done, good and faithful servant. Whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done to me. Do you remember that? There's a place for that too. But what he's saying here is, in the same way that a servant, a hired worker, would simply be expected to do his job, and not receive, an abundance of praise for just doing what he's expected to do, so too God expects of us obedience to his word, his commands. He expects us to follow the ways of Jesus as he models them for us and embody and imitate what we see in him, chiefly because that is the best way for us to live. Right? That's what God designed us to do. And so when we do what he designed us to do, we do what we were made to do, and things work the way they were supposed to work. Sin always being a complicating factor. Okay? So he invites us to this posture of humble service that we see in Christ, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but taking on the form of a servant, he humbled himself and took on the nature of a man, and then humbled himself even further to the point of death. And you know what I'm talking about, right? Philippians chapter 2. But then, that's the humiliation of Christ. You have the exaltation. But then, having suffered all, even death, he was raised again to new life. And then God exalted him to the highest place, so that every knee would bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. So what Jesus calls us to, he does first. Right? So when he calls us to humble service, he models it for us to show us how to do this thing that he calls us to. As I look around the room, and I can't see who's on the live stream, but I just look around the room, I think to myself, faithful servants, all of you. Deeply rooted in your relationship with Jesus, committed to a lifestyle and a posture of faith, generous in your time, in your sweat, in your, Steve was just giving me the dollar signs, yeah, generous financially as well. And he just walks in and, yeah, I love you, Steve. I think you probably just came in off the mower? Burger King. Mower earlier, yeah. So I just wanted to say, you are doing a good job, all of you, in all that you do. And I want to thank you for that. It gives me joy to serve here as pastor and be part of such a community of faith with so many good men and women, boys and girls, who are doing their best to follow through on what God calls us to do. And I have every confidence that when the day comes that Jesus calls you home, and I pray that for all of you, that is not anytime soon, that at that day you will receive the crown of life. And Jesus will say, thank you for all of this great work that you did. Well done, good and faithful servants. Right? So that comes. For now, it's time to work, because there's work to be done. And we're going to talk a little bit about that this afternoon. Let's pray. Jesus, today's a good day, beautiful day. We're thankful for that. We're thankful for the opportunity we have to live as your people rightly with you, with one another, and with this world, where so often there's so much that's wrong. We thank you for the death that you died in our place and the life that you live in our place so that we might live eternally with you. We thank you for the resurrection life even now we experience, although in part we look forward to experiencing it in full on the day when you return to make all things new. And so we pray that in that time in between, you would give us courage, boldness, steadfastness to do the work you call us to do, loving and serving one another and this community, giving freely, serving joyfully, and in so doing, bringing the kingdom of God into this world. So we ask your blessing upon that, upon this conversation, and all the decisions that will flow from it. We ask this all in Jesus' name. And everyone agreed and said, amen. Okay. Thanks. All right, so here's our agenda. This is going to guide our conversation today. We're going to start out by introducing to you the candidates for our governing board. As you know, there are 7 individuals that serve on our governing board, representing you, the voters, the members of the congregation, in stewarding the ministry, in kind of developing the strategy and the direction, and in overseeing me as lead pastor and the team that I lead, which helps carry out the ministry on a day-to-day basis. That ministry, as you've heard me say before, may be board-governed and staff-led, but it's volunteer-driven, which means to say there's a lot that we do as staff to plan and organize, but it wouldn't be possible to get it done without men and women like these you see who are currently serving on the board, and then all of you serving in the various ways that you do. So thank you, and we're going to do more thanking in just a moment. So Jim Homily and Laurel Van Meveren are currently 2 governing board members who are reaching the end of their 2nd terms. So the way it's set up is we have a maximum of 2 consecutive 3-year terms. And so both of these have served 6 years now and done so admirably, and we're thankful for their service. Jim has served as vice chair and secretary in various times and places, Laurel on various other roles. And so to replace them, we need 2 individuals, and we have 3 candidates for those 2 positions. The names are on the screens for you. Mike McClune, sorry, I skipped Brittany Kester, Mike McClune, and Matt Meyer. In the room here, you all should have received a handout that has their stories, their faces. What I would say about them, and I think online, I'm not sure, Jason, how they do this, but you could click over to our website. I know it's available to download the same printout on our website. Let me just give you a brief kind of intro to each of them. You can read more detail. Brittany is a young single female who is a lifelong member, graduate of St. Peter, very involved along with the rest of her family. What would be interesting for her, kind of coming from the professional world as a young female, we've never had that on the board during my time here. And so I would be excited to have that kind of fresh voice and perspective in the mix as well. Mike McClune has been a member here longer than I've been here. He and his wife live in the community, their daughters and son. I'm not sure if they went to preschool here or not. I was going to check on that, and I haven't got around to doing that yet. But I know they went to public elementary and high school. And his wife is a 2nd grade teacher, I believe, at a local elementary school. So that would be an interesting perspective, too, to have member family not with kids in the school here through the grade school at least. Mike's work background is in the area of business management. He's served as a kind of CEO level leader of a number of companies. He specializes in going in and turning around companies, and so brings that kind of executive level experience, which would be a great asset as well. Matt Meyer is a 5th generation St. Peter member. His son Noah's in 5th grade this year, so 6th generation. Ken and Vicki Meyer, many of you might know. And Matt is currently a faculty member at Conant High School in Hoffman Estates. He focuses in particular on students with disabilities. And his wife, Barb, while not technically a member here, is in worship more often than most members are. She and her mom are members at St. Edna's, and so they actually worship at both places most weekends. And so very dear friend and very committed part of the St. Peter community. And so 2 out of these 3 will be elected by the congregation based on who gets the most votes. Okay? If there were 4 or more candidates, for example, the process would be you'd have an election, and if you didn't have anyone with a majority, that is 51% or more, or whatever it would be, then you'd drop one off, and you'd go to another ballot, and you'd work your way down to the final 2. But since we have 3, just the lowest vote receiving candidate would be considered not elected in the other 2. So 1 ballot. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if we could have all 3? So to do that, we'd have to fire somebody. And so what we do in the past is we've had some of these names on ballots or in the process before. What we've said to them is 2 will get elected, 1 of you won't. We don't know which one. That'll be up to God leading the congregation to make that choice. if it's not you, then we'd love for you to think about some other ways to serve now, and then next year maybe it'll be your time. And they all understand that. So, any other questions about the elections process and the candidates? I would envision us doing this pretty much first thing in the meeting on Sunday, so that it can then be counted, and then we can have the announcements during the course of the meeting. Okay. Vision update. We're going to talk and kind of zero in on things that we're doing, things that we're excited about, plans that are in place here in Arlington Heights and the surrounding community, starting with praise reports. And so here's what we're going to do, is we asked some of our team to just bring us stuff that we should celebrate, and then we're going to do that to kind of celebrate what God's done and is doing among us. And so what I'm actually going to ask you to do is every time I get done with a slide and a story is to actually applaud. And if you wanted to hoop and holler, you'd be welcome to do that, but I understand you might not be up to that. It's middle of the day, and so I'll leave that up to you and the Holy Spirit. But everyone, we do want to celebrate and applaud at the end of each one, all right? And I will cheer you on. So here's our first one. We had our first A Night to Shine event in February of this year. Pastor Paul Klepke's over here. Pastor and his wife Julie were really kind of spearheading it along with the team he recruited. We helped these guests with special needs from our community. 87, I think, is the total of guests, over 200 volunteers. As you can see, 39 supporting partner organizations. If you were involved at all at A Night to Shine, it was powerful just to see the simple joy on these friends' faces as they were being recognized, honored, and celebrated. And so I just want to say thanks to Pastor Paul and everyone for A Night to Shine. It was awesome. And we're already scheduled for next year. It's always the Friday before Valentine's Day, and it's in partnership with the Tim Tebow Foundation. So Tim Tebow Foundation, if you listen into, we want to say thanks to. You can come next year, okay? Here's our next one. Our care ministry, in 2018 alone, made 950 hospital and shut-in calls. And I just have to say, I did very few of them, okay? And so what that means is Pastor Paul and his team of deacons, you can see some of them on the screen here, Henry Kogler, John Sommerfeld, Dick Larson, Dave Moss, Dale Dippin. I'm just kind of hanging off on the side over there just for a group photo. That was when we kind of blessed and commissioned them after their training. Plus we have pastors Bruning, Kittle, and Noel who assist in that as well. And what that means is not that we have tons and tons of sick people. We have that, but we just have a lot more care. And I was visiting one member who it happened to work for me to go see over at the Lutheran home. And it's a relatively newer member of the St. Peter family. They came from another nearby church a few years ago. And the wife was in rehab, and I went to see them. And afterwards, the husband said to me, Micah, pastor, whatever he said, I just want you to know that the care we have received in these last few weeks. And he couldn't even finish the sentence. He's like, right? So I just want to say thanks, Pastor Paul. Thanks to all those who serve in that way. And Carla here helps kind of chronicle that and keep track of that and organize that. So Carla, we want to point out Carla Heimsoff as well. So let's give thanks to God for that. Right? Very, very good. And yes, Carla.
Up until the 4th of this month, we have done 400.
Already 400 in 2019. Yeah. And so that number may go up. And the goal in this is not replacing pastoral visits. That's why we brought on 3 additional guys to assist with that. But it would be to add to that. And part of the plan and vision in the future would be to say men and women who have the gift of caring, we want to develop and release into that. And that'll take shape in a couple different forms. One of them, Pastor Paul and the team are working on now in the area of grief and people dealing with loss. Grief Share is in the works. And so if you have any questions on that, Pastor Paul is the guy to talk to, right? If you come to me, I'll just say, it's going to be awesome. Talk to Pastor Paul, right? That's how it works. So, okay. Youth ministry. This is a picture from our training session for parents and students in middle school for First Communion. Some of you have been around a good long while, know that the rhythms for confirmation and First Communion have changed over the years. Just as different pastors have come and gone, different leadership, different strategies. A few years ago, we started offering parents the option to say when their kids are ready to start taking communion. And we set the kind of lower limit at 5th grade, because our observation was round about that time, they're interested, and they're ready. But we wanted parents to also be part of that process, so we invite parents to come with their kids. We had 45 students participate this year, which is our highest ever. And some of them were 5th grade, some were 6th, some were 7th or 8th, some were family groups together. And some families prefer to wait until their kids finish confirmation, which now lands in the beginning of the freshman year of high school. And so we leave it up to the parents to decide, what's best, when are their children ready. And it was just a really beautiful thing. Maundy Thursday, were any of you here for the Maundy Thursday service, right? We do it on that night because that's the night that Jesus instituted the Lord's Supper. And one of the things that's been interesting for me, Carla, you'll appreciate this, is at the end of the Maundy Thursday service, we leave in silence, and then we go outside and we have a party for First Communion. So I'm trying to figure out how does that fit together, and we're doing both, but I think you can appreciate it. It feels a little bit interesting to me, but it's a good thing. Like I said, today, this afternoon, we're doing confirmation check-ins. It's a powerful time for me as pastor and for Kristen as our youth leader, sit down one-on-one with each 8th grade student who's wrapping up that year and moving on to their freshman year to talk about spiritual rhythms and habits and practices that they have developed and they want to maintain going off into high school. And it's just a fruitful time. And so we've got other things going on for middle school and high school, and we're especially excited about high school students who are stepping up to lead in the middle school environments as well. And so just lots to give thanks for in the youth area, so let's give thanks to God for that. Kids Hope. Yesterday, I finished my school year over at Westgate Elementary, where I mentor a young student there in 3rd grade. And he invited all of his friends, and so we had like 5 or 6 of us having this rowdy last time there. What Kids Hope is it's a partnership that we form with a Christian not-for-profit called Kids Hope USA that resources, trains, and equips volunteers from a local congregation to enter into a local elementary school and mentor students that are identified as needing additional care and support. Same day, I happened to be over at Ivy Hill for a meeting there, another elementary school in town, and I talked to the school counselor afterwards. I said, "Have you heard anything about Kids Hope?" And she's like, "I have no idea what that is." I said, "Well, here's what it is." She starts furiously writing down her notes, like I should figure out what this is, because there's students that just need extra time and attention. Not necessarily bad kids. I don't want anyone to think that. They just sometimes need a little extra attention. And so what breaks the mold a little bit is usually it's one church, one local school. But the need in our community has been such that there aren't other churches ready yet to take on more. And so as you can see, we have 3 schools that we're doing this in currently. Westgate Elementary, that's where it started, Windsor Elementary, and St. Peter. We bring it home here for some of our students too. South Middle School next year is what we're working on, and then maybe Ivy Hill and Dryden, and we'll see where it stops from there. But what I love about it is it takes some of our most passionate, committed, dedicated staff and volunteers and deploys them for free to the schools in our community to bless them. And let me just tell you, it produces an abundant harvest. So if that stirs up something in you saying, 1 hour a week, I might be able to do that. What I've said to everyone on staff here is that can be part of your job, right? And we'll just figure out how to make that work. And so staff are like, "You'd really say it's worth our time for us to go and love and serve kids that are not going to come to school here?" And I'm like, yep, because they're part of this community, and we're here to love and serve the community. So Jill Sheets, Jill Hansen are really the 2 staff members who lead and drive Kids Hope USA. You see a few pictures here. Let's give thanks to God for that. It's awesome. We have record numbers in our summer camps this summer. Technically, we actually have multiple summer camps going on simultaneously. We have our summer camp that we've had for a good long while with over 300 students enrolled. 80% of them are not part of the St. Peter family already. And so it's a huge mission opportunity. 8 weeks, some of them 5 days a week, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And we get a chance to love and serve them and introduce them to Jesus. Really, really powerful stuff. We also have a PDO camp. That's Parents' Day Out for 2- and 3-year-olds. That runs 12 months. It runs throughout the summer, so that's really a 12-month enterprise. And then there's a third outside camp called Galileo, which focuses on science, technology, engineering, and math. And they rent space from us, And so we have 3 summer camps simultaneously using our buildings in the summer months, which for the old trustees in the room, you know how hard it is to get the school cleaned and fixed and ready for the next school year. Imagine every classroom filled all summer long, 2, right? So sometimes our summer days are busier than our school year days, which is just an interesting shift in the dynamic here. And so we've just had to find other times and ways throughout the year to take care of our facilities. We'll talk more about that a little bit later on. So just really thrilled with the opportunity we have to love and to serve our neighbors and to develop relationships with them through this. So let's give thanks to God for our summer camps. Fusion is our Sunday morning kids ministry. Jill Sheets, Jill Hansen are the primary leaders. What they're just celebrating right now is the small group leaders who are discipling children every week, and the follow-up opportunities that has created for parents to help engage them throughout the week as well. So let's give thanks to God for our children's ministry. Big Days of Serving and Help USA Troops are a couple of ways in which we are generous to people across the community and across the country. We helped send 1,200 care packages to deployed troops. This was back in March. Chris Dickinson, one of our members, really helped lead that, as well as our Big Days of Serving enterprise. Karen Kogler is the staff link for that. So let's give thanks to God for those serving opportunities. Right? What those are they're intended to be low threshold ways for people to try out serving, maybe who aren't committed in an ongoing way, like with Kids Hope or something like that. Okay? And so it's kind of a first taste. Red Letter Challenge was a whole lot of fun. Perhaps the single most powerful moment I can recall of intentional Bible reading as a community. And about 400 people picked up copies of the book and were reading it, and were following along with text messages, and just really excited about what God was stirring and doing among us as a community as we sought to build our lives on the solid foundation of His Word. Okay? So let's give thanks to God for Red Letter Challenge and all that. Christmas and Easter were probably some of our best that anyone on the team recalls. Just great spirit of worship and celebration and joy, great atmosphere, and God blessed us with a beautiful Easter day in terms of weather. Do you remember the blizzards on either side? That was crazy. I don't remember that before. I remember Ash Thursday one year where we had really bad snow on Ash Wednesday, but yeah, that was wild. But just awesome opportunities for worship. So let's give thanks to God for that. Our facilities are in phenomenal shape, all things considered, right? And a lot of that's due to the dedication of the staff, but also Bob Vossel, we wanted to point out, who is an unpaid staff member, you might say, or he volunteers, 40, 50, 60 hours a week. I don't know if anyone's keeping track. And so whenever you see Bob, just give him an attaboy and a thanks. And he's not in it for that. Like we talked about earlier, he's just doing his duty, right? And this is what he loves to do, but just does tremendous work all throughout our campus. So for Bob and for all the volunteers and the facilities and the buildings and grounds crews, let's give thanks for that. Speaking of which, Steve the man, right there on your throne, the mowing machine. We've got Dennis and Paul, who's in the room here today. Cheryl, I saw walking in. Here's Bob in the back. Bob, you walked in at just the right time. Everyone say, thank you, Bob. There we go. You timed that, didn't you? You know. No, he didn't. Yeah. Just to Paul, Cheryl, Steve, Dennis, I don't see in the room right now, just and the rest of the team on the garden and the lawns, just thank you for all your work as well. So let's give thanks for them. Our school continues to be just a powerful tool to disciple children and to connect with our community. Our theme this year was being the hands and feet of Jesus. Our staff did a great job working through state recognition and accreditation in the same year. We had a wonderful gala event this spring, raising $60,000 plus that'll be invested in a new technology lab. It's a step beyond the old computer lab model, and so we're working on when and where and how to kind of develop that out. Enrollment remains strong and looks great for next year. We're excited about that. We're also excited to welcome a new principal. Jonathan Heineman and his family are moving here at the end of the month, just up the street over here. They bought a house just down from you guys, on Walnut and Thomas, in the hood. So right by the Borks, too, who aren't here right now. And so they're very, very excited to be part of this community, to join in the ministry. Jonathan and Mel, short for Melissa, and their 3 boys Their youngest, just born a couple weeks ago, we're actually going to baptize at our opening chapel service of the next school year to kind of celebrate that as part of the school community. So that'll be an awesome thing. So, and Bruce Rudy, 12 years, finishing his ministry with dignity and poise and wisdom and grace and strength, and we're going to just honor him far more than he actually wants us to. And we've been doing that already, and we'll continue to do that this week. So let's just give thanks to God for our school. Yeah. Bruce. Okay, I'm going to shift over to Brian to talk a little bit about some of the stuff we're developing in the area of discipleship in this season.
It's good to celebrate, isn't it? I think for me, sometimes being in ministry, we get so focused on what's right in front of us that we forget to kind of step back and look at what God is doing, what he has done. So it's good to just call that out and celebrate it. I want to give you a quick update on what God's doing as far as discipleship, particularly with adult discipleship here at St. Peter. Some of the language that we've been starting to use more recently is this: community, faith, and mission. So we want each person to be connected to a community of faith on mission. So what do we mean by that? We want each person to be experiencing biblical community, where they're receiving support, encouragement, prayer from one another. We want each person to be growing in their faith actively as they live that out every day and follow Jesus. And then we want each person to be connected to mission and joining Jesus where they live, work, and play in what Jesus is already doing. So we've started to look at staff as leadership at how can we filter everything we do as a ministry in our church and our school through this? And how can we move everything toward the center of those three? So we may have a ministry or a program that focuses highly on community. How can we then bring some faith and some mission into that and move it toward the center? So that's been our discussion as we talk about how can we help each person be connected in this way.
Another thing, let me just kind of add on to that, just kind of came to mind, is an example that could experience a movement would be worship, right? Worship is an expression of community, we all agree, right? You come together, brothers and sisters in Christ. And faith, obviously, it's where we strengthen, receive faith. So what we've been trying to do is look for ways, how do we also bring an element of mission into that? And so sometimes we'll do a big days of serving thing or a serving project in conjunction with that. That's a way to kind of bring that towards the center. Or in the last few weeks, we've been adding the discipleship questions to the back of the handout here in the sanctuary. And I've asked you every week, go ahead and fill that out because we want you to be thinking, okay, where is God at work around me? And what is he calling me to do next? And who does he have that's close to me but far from him? Right? And so we want you to be increasingly thinking about that. You might not do a whole lot while you're up here at church receiving something to strengthen your faith, but we want you to increasingly see the connection between then going to where you live, work, and play and saying, okay, who does God have around me? What can I do to love them and serve them? And that's participating in the mission of Jesus. So that'd be one example.
One of our dreams that we've had for a number of years in wanting to do this community faith and mission is breaking down our church into specific neighborhoods and areas and looking at how can we deploy our people and impact the individual neighborhoods that are represented through our people. So we've gotten to the point where we've done that. We've identified some potential families that can help us lead that. And so we've invited them to an event this next week where we'll just talk about the vision for this initiative. So the initial goal would be to have these families, we've invited about 50 to start, to go into their neighborhoods. We'll give them a list of who are the other St. Peter people, church and school families who live close by them that they may not even know. So how can we get those people connected, develop those relationships with the goal of eventually joining Jesus in what he's doing in their neighborhood and helping reach their neighbors for good. So that's exciting for us to see some movement on that. You'll be hearing more about that. Maybe you're one of the lead families, or maybe you'll be contacted by one of them coming soon.
Yeah. Am I talking about this one or you? I forget. Me. Okay. Yes, Mary Ellen. Yep.
I just wondered, going back to
Yep.
discipleship, when someone comes in here at least
Yep.
on Sunday mornings and opens the bulletin,
Yep.
there's no mention of Bible study,
Mm.
like when or where there's a Bible study at the other end of the building.
Yeah.
And so no one would know unless they've read the pulse, or
Yep.
if they're a member, they might know because they read the pulse. But a visitor, or if you happen to not read the pulse in the last week or so because you were gone or whatever,
Sure.
maybe you don't remember when that Bible study is. So it just seems like that would be something important to put
Yep.
in the bulletin
Yeah, okay, that's good feedback, I appreciate that. We're constantly, the question was, would it ever make sense to put a listing of where the Bible studies are, or the Sunday morning life groups, or whatever else is going on, in the handout that people receive on the way in? We're constantly just reviewing what should be in there, what's helpful, what's necessary, balancing that against time, energy, and materials in terms of printing and waste and that kind of thing. So as you all have observed, we've gone from printing a booklet every week down to printing mostly just one sheet of paper. And most of them are in black and white because the cost to print in color is just 7 times higher than it is in black and white. And we're like, we love you all, but you can deal with a black and white color, picture, right? We've also tried to use monitors and screens throughout the building to push out and promote more activities. So what I'm going to say is we'll think about that, and that's good feedback, and see, does that make sense to also include in there? One thing you may have noticed that we've been tinkering with is the back side of the handout and what goes on the back side of the handout, and that's a fairly fluid spot. It might be news, it might be a Bible reading, and sometimes I don't mean to be crass, but sometimes we just drop something in there so it's not blank. And so maybe that's a good spot to think about, hey, here's what else you can do this morning.
Well, and also like the different worship times.
Yeah.
I don't think that's in there.
It's on the front bottom, but not in any detail. So it just says Saturday 5 p.m., Sunday 8:45, 9:15, and 11. Yeah. Yep. And on the back we have all the pastors listed and contact information lower in the back side. And there's questions, should we have Matthew, our traditional worship leader, and other staff or volunteers? And so we just bump up against how much to put in, how much to be changing week after week, how much stays the same. And so thanks for the feedback. We'll take that into account.
Or maybe even putting it on the
Yep.
slides
Yep.
every week.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Let me jump forward. So one of the things that we've been looking at now for some time, and just looking at the guys in the room and the ladies too, you all know this, there are some chronic facilities needs that need to be addressed. We've been studying the best way to approach them. A year ago, we laid out some conceptual drawings that would have addressed parts of them and sought feedback from the congregation. In the course of that, we also said, let's talk about, do we ever want to parcel off and sell parts of the property in order to finance facilities improvements, deferred maintenance, et cetera? And the clear, resounding answer from the leadership, from the staff, from the membership was, no, we don't want to do that. Okay? So that's not really even in consideration anymore. It was just a good process for us to go through and think about and have an answer to. And out of that, though, you may recall, the idea came up, what if we were to go to the village and ask them to vacate Highland Avenue from Clarendon to Olive so that we could have a contiguous piece of property, just like they did the Vale over here. And so the board kind of reflected on that and went to the village, and the village said predictably, no, we're not really interested in that, right? There may be a small window of possibility for us to go back with a strong plan and say, no, we really think you should, but our board's sense of it would be probably not worth our time and our energy and our resources. And so then the next step becomes, okay, what else do we want to do, and how do we want to do it? How do we want to pay for it? Okay, and so what we know needs to be done are these big ticket items. The west parking lot, if you park over there, it's got big potholes and so forth, and we've just been punting that down the road for years, just waiting until it was the right time to deal with it. The sanctuary beams in here have structural issues where they are exposed that need to be addressed. These numbers, by the way, are ballpark figures. They're not meant to be specific quotes, but they give you a sense of what might need to be done. Our organ is a 60-year-old instrument that needs to be updated with the leather interior components. And so we'd be waiting to do that until such time as we're doing major work in here anyway, because it would be out of commission for a few months at least. It would come back in pristine shape and form for another 50, 60 years, and that's about how often you need to do this work. There are other major infrastructure issues throughout the existing facility: HVAC, plumbing, windows, upgrades to Wi-Fi technology, which increasingly become an issue. We're just saying that could easily cost $1 million or more. In addition to that, there are other things we'd love to also do, as you know. So childcare is an urgent and important programmatic growth area that we want to pursue aggressively. It allows us to extend our relationship window down to childbirth, baptism, 6 weeks old or something like that, where we could begin a relationship with a family. What we know is during that preschool window, now down to 2-year-old PDO, Parents Day Out, that's where most of our new members of the congregation come from. And so if we can add 2 years to that, it just strengthens the base all the way throughout. So it just makes sense. The only problem is, as I alluded to earlier, during the summers and during the school days, there's not any room that's sitting around unused. And so we're looking currently at ways to re-envision the utilization of space that we have right now to make some space available. What needs to happen is it needs to be set up with furniture and left empty until DCFS chooses in their good graces to come by and inspect it, which could take 6 months or more. And if you follow the news, you know that in Illinois in particular, our DCFS is just in really tough shape right now. So that's been hard. Bob, you suggested at one of the last town halls, there's lots of empty real estate, in storefronts around, and that's something, I drive past a few of them every day, and I often wonder, is that the way to go? You'll hear later, we're also in conversations with some other churches. That might be another way to go. I'll get to that a little later on. But suffice it to say, long-term, our vision would be to develop a substantial child care program here that feeds into our preschool, our school, into the church, and all the way throughout. And last year, that really came through as a strong priority. Parking sometimes is in the wrong spot for where we need it. And so when we have major school events or anything in the gyms, for example, all of our parking is about as far away as you can get on the campus from where they actually need to enter in. So that presents a logistical challenge. Also, as I see our friends walking up from the west parking lot, that incline, right? When we were all young, that was good exercise. Now, I see people struggling, and it worries me. And so one of the things that we would look at is bringing parking closer to the entrances that they would need to use, while we're also looking at updating and improving the parking lot on the west side of Highland Avenue. Okay? Community space, one of the challenges we have is on Sunday morning or during the school day, if we want to have something nice outside of school, there's no room, right? So if you wanted to have a Bible study, or if you wanted to have a community event, or if you wanted to invite families in for something, there's literally no room. And that's great because we're using the room we have for lots of good stuff, but it limits some of what we can do. And so one of the things we'd want to do is expand our capacity to create space where people can gather and linger in addition to classroom space and worship space. Our offices are currently scattered throughout the building in every available storage room and closet, right? Bob, you can attest, right? We've taken literally closets and turned them into offices, and nobody's complaining, but it doesn't work the most efficiently, and then we don't have any place to put stuff, and so that's a concern. The MAC floor in particular needs some updating, and then a question that's often asked is how much do we have left on our mortgage from our last go-round? And so there's a possibility of trying to drive down some of that principal, right? Each year, in round numbers, it's about $250,000 that we have to come up with to pay the mortgage. About half of that interest, about half of that principal, right? And we're managing that fine for the time being, and we foresee managing that fine into the future. But if we were able to have that debt gone and be able to use that money for ministry, that's awesome. Does that make sense? So wrap all that up. The next steps that the board envisions are, it has formed a task force led by one of the board members, Tim Stokel, to interview capital campaign consultants. The goal would be to have the board select one that would begin feasibility study later this year, in the summer perhaps, or fall, that would lead to a major capital campaign, and then the work commencing on all the major issues that need to be done. The plans themselves would be determined based on the feasibility study, which would be a bunch of conversations, cottage meetings, town hall meetings that we would have with you as the community saying, what do we feel the Spirit is calling us to do next? And how much are we willing to commit financially to getting that done? Okay? Now, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that this is the path we need to follow. Probably the thing that's most frustrating is, in the meantime, we don't have an extra few $100,000 to fix a few things that desperately need to get fixed, right? So in the short term, what that means is we're going to be drying out the exterior beams and looking to wrap them so that they stay dry until next year, when we'd envision the earliest would be that we'd actually structurally change them and address them to fix them long term. The same would be with the parking lot. We're going to try to find a way to patch holes, clean it up so that it's passable, and then next year, probably at this time, would be the earliest it would fit into our schedules to tear it out and put in a brand new parking lot, which is what we anticipate the village requiring. So, capital campaign beginning quietly this year, leading to it publicly maybe at the end of this year and into the beginning of 2020, work commencing probably mid-2020. So I'll pause right now and ask for questions and feedback from anyone. Yeah, Cheryl.
Yeah, funds that are negative on the mortgage initiative.
Yeah.
How are those being utilized? Is it sole principal, additional principal reduction?
Correct, yeah, any funds that are coming in through the mortgage initiative would go straight to the principal.
But not above and beyond the regular payment. That helps pay the principal side of the payment.
Correct, yep.
So what it does, otherwise that comes out of surpluses or reserves. It doesn't come out of the operating budget, and that's per GAAP, the accounting guidelines. So the interest you'll see shows up in our budget. The principal would come out of other funds that we have to pay for the principal. And that's just based on the GAAP rules. And we'll point that out a little bit later on. So currently what we've been doing is paying on schedule every month like clockwork, and we're okay doing that for now. Good question.
How much longer is that debt active?
I believe it was a 25-year note. I'm seeing Don and Brian, you guys were on the building committee around that time and maybe involved in the financing. I think it's 25 years.
We were not involved with the financing.
You weren't? That was Brad, you're right. Okay, that was Brad. So my recollection was it was not a 30-year mortgage, it was a 25-year mortgage, and it would have started approximately 2011. So was that put us about a third of the way through it, maybe? Something like that.
So I'll be dead before it's paid off.
I hope not. Yeah, Ed.
Was that a 30-year amortized payable 5 years though? I thought there was
There's
campaign to pay it down, but they amortized over.
so campaign 1, Forward in Faith, raised money to get started. Campaign 2 raised money to pay for it along the way, not necessarily pay down principal. Okay? And then also, we invested in some other new ministry programs during that time. So in the school, in the church, we did a few other things. And South Africa was always wrapped up in all of those too. So what that did was that gave us capacity to make mortgage payments during the duration of that 3-year campaign so that we could then build the capacity within our operating plan to do that ongoing, which we are currently doing. So there is, and Brad Schroeder would be, or Bruce or Sherry in the finance office would be best equipped to answer this, but my recollection was that it was a 10-year and another 10-year interest, so like a fixed interest rate for the first 10 years, a reset at the 10-year mark, and then for the final 5 years, I think something like that. So we may be coming close to a point where the interest rate changes sometime in the next couple of years, so we can look into that. Does that answer your question, Ed? Yeah.
The parking situation you're talking about, this incline,
Yep.
it's not much of an incline. If you can't make that, you're in bad shape.
And so what we're saying is people are in bad shape and they have a hard time making
I
it.
know, we're all getting old.
Yep.
You got a lot of grass that gets
Yep.
cut over here, right outside that window. Would make a nice parking area, especially for people that can't walk far.
Correct.
Is that something?
From the last year's planning, what I would anticipate is as soon as we possibly can, we will add a small parking and drop-off area on the west side of the sanctuary and the entrance area. That will be kind of like a little mini circle drive, similar to that, off of Highland, which will allow people of all ages to come off the street to unload. And if we do it right, I'm told that we can have that parking level virtually at the same level as where we're standing right now, right? Maybe a curb step down, right? So they would then take one curb step up or ramp up, and then it would be as close to these doors as we possibly can get that drop-off point. And that would be primarily then designated for visitor and handicap parking. Currently, I think we require 7 or 8 handicap spots for the entire campus, based on our current arrangements. We have some over there, which would probably remain, and some over there, but we could potentially consolidate them all to one particular spot. So it would be closer, I would envision, to our front doors than the Circle Drive is currently, which would be a help to those who need it. Yeah. So, I mean, we don't want to give up green space where we don't have to, but at the same time, that would be a smart thing to do, and I think everyone would be happy. Yeah. You're intimately familiar with our green space, so, yeah. All right, I want to move on. You can ask more follow-up questions on some of these. This is really great. I appreciate it. And again, live stream friends, if you want to chime in, do it through the chat feature, and Jason will get our attention. So 10 and 10 is a big dream that our leadership has been praying over for the last few years. And the gist of it is we feel called by God to have an impact for the kingdom on the region around us, not just for us here in Arlington Heights. That's calling us to help start 10 new things across the region to enter communities where the gospel is not flourishing, as far as we can tell, and then we can help do something. A year ago, we introduced you to the possibility that a church on the west side of the city of Chicago in the Belmont-Cragen neighborhood, Trinity on Meade and Wrightwood, would be closing and would offer us their campus and assets and everything left. We've spent the last year in dialogue with them and with the district in preparation for it. This picture is a picture of the exterior of the church and the gym facility. The facility itself is in remarkably good shape, given the fact that it's down to just a handful of people who have been responsible for it. They have reached the point where they are saying, we've done all we can do, we're ready to pass the baton off, and through the negotiations and the conversations at the district level, they were introduced to St. Peter, and we're ready to say to the congregation, it's time to say a holy yes to this offer. We are conducting now, or scheduling now, Bob, you had asked about this, phase 1 environmental studies to make sure that before we actually sign any documents.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yep.
Was, have we hired an outside company to do an inspection, same way you would on a house that you were purchasing?
Yep.
But, you know, as far as the environmental, as far as the structural, as far as the mechanical, you know, we don't know what we're getting handed here.
We do know from what we've been able to look at and see ourselves, but to your point, so a few of the friends in the room have been down there. So we know enough to say we should look at it and we should consider accepting it. But the studies that you're describing are scheduled, I believe, Brian, for a week from tomorrow, right? So what the board would do is make sure that all those are clean and clear before we actually execute the transfer of deed and title. And so the congregation, we're asking to affirm the kind of vision and direction by saying yes to it. But what I'm saying is if that report comes back lemon, bad, then that would cause us to say, no, we need to reconsider that. As of right now, the facilities look clean, reasonably, in decent shape. They need some investment in order to improve them and get them ready to open. Our vision would be to start an early childhood program there that would connect and serve the community. We've done some initial data market research, and we've had some conversations with individuals that will help us get that done. And so we feel it's ready for us to say yes to this offer. They would then dissolve as a congregation, transfer their membership to other nearby churches, and we would be then given charge of this place to see what we can do with it. And the goal would be build a sustainable program there that connects and serves the community, that leads to relationships that you can use to then build a new church out of over time. Not right away. It would probably take a few years. Yeah, Ray?
I had two just concerns on that church there, and inside, parking is a walking church.
Correct. It's a neighborhood church, so there's no parking lot as such. Yep.
That's a concern. The other concern is inside, what's it going to, I'm sure your due diligence came up with this, to rehab, not the church per se, but the actual child learning
Yeah, the early childhood center.
area with the city and
Yep.
issues.
So in the process up to this point, we didn't know, are they going to offer it, right? And so up until 2-3 weeks ago, that was still up in the air. The membership of that congregation has the sovereign decision to decide what they're going to do with it. They could sell it and give the money to the district or to something else. They could do whatever they want with it. We couldn't control that. So we didn't want to put too much resourcing into extensive planning if it wasn't even going to come our way in the first place. So to understand why we're in the sequence of where we are now, we have done some initial studying of it and initial planning for it. We would estimate, and this one is not on it apparently, we would estimate approximately $150,000 to $200,000 of facilities and equipment costs that we would need to get it open, probably 4 to 5 early childhood classrooms. You'll see later on, we have set aside just under $200,000 in funds from the foundation here for 10 and 10. And so we could pay for most, if not all of it, in cash if we wanted to. We probably won't do that. We would probably secure some financing through LCEF or Thriven or something like that, and then have the business plan for the program we'd have there pay for that. So it doesn't come out of our offerings and our budget here. It would come out of a separate P&L that we would have for the enterprise there. We estimate just to have and own the building outright, starting whenever that finally happens. Right now it would be, for example, July 1st. It would cost $2,000 a month for utility, insurance, security, just to make sure that the building is in decent shape. And remember I said before, it takes 6 to 12 months for DCFS to come in and approve something. So that would be cost that we would just bear up front to be ready for when they would come, which we anticipated, and the seed money that we have set aside would be used to pay for those costs. So at this point in time, to the St. Peter congregation, it's not going to cost us dollars and cents to have, invest, and start this new concept because of the money that's already been set aside from our foundation. Okay? People may choose to contribute towards that if they're excited about this and like, hey, I want to be part of this. There'll be volunteer opportunities both in the facilities side and also the program side when the time comes. And so that'll be an exciting thing for our congregation. Somebody asked, Mike, are you going to go be the pastor over there now? And the answer is no. I live right here and don't plan to move anytime soon. We love this community, love this church environment as well. In some of what we're going to talk about, I may visit other places on a monthly basis or something like that, but this will always be my home base. When the time comes that there's enough relationships from the programs we run there to start a new worshiping community, then we would talk about which pastor do we want to have do that. But that's still at least a few years down the line. Brian?
So if I understand you correctly, the first year, there wouldn't be really anything going on, including the church?
There would not be, we would not start a church because we don't know anyone. There's no one to show up, right? And
I know the answer, but I'm going to ask
Yep.
the question, so I'm
Yeah,
going to ask this. How many current members are there at the church?
there are 4 ladies.
Just so I'm
Yep.
clear.
Yep. And that's what's left of the congregation. They're lovely ladies, and they've done a good job holding on to their lovely church. Okay? There could be other activities we would choose to do, sports camps, after-school mentoring. There's other things we could do. The early childhood, which is the revenue generator, that's the thing we'd have to wait for DCFS licensing. Once we're done with the work we would do. We estimate, like I said, $150,000 to $200,000 for upgrades and improvements, which is not major in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, Brian?
There was a comment at times that possibly other Surreyson and Lutheran churches would go in on this with us. Is that no longer with that?
That brings me to the next thing, which is the way that went was in the direction of networking congregations around the city of Chicago to form an affiliate with an organization called Link International. Link International is an RSO, a registered service organization of the LCMS, our church body, which means it's all legit with the synod. Okay? What they do is they enter into cities and they deploy a city director with a small team that identifies new opportunities and new entrepreneurs who want to start ministry stuff in cities across the country and across the world. And they provide training, accountability, and encouragement to help get that done. So what St. Peter has done is bring together about 20 congregations around getting this started. And this Link Chicago affiliate we would anticipate being officed out of Trinity on Mead. And so that may be a relationship that we would have with them directly. But we don't know that for sure. It's just based on when they come and where they decide to put up shop. They have a habit so far in the other major cities, Houston, LA, the Bay City area, San Francisco, Twin Cities, Milwaukee, or where they're active currently, of connecting with immigrant and minority communities very well, far more than we do. And what could happen is that it could lead to an ethnic immigrant worshiping community using that space in some sort of relationship with us through Link. What it does not bring, if this is a question behind your question, Brian, is a bunch of people sending us money to pay for this project that we're doing. So for this one in particular, the Trinity Mead, I'd see that as us primarily kind of investing in it, getting started. With Link as being another one of our 10 and 10 wins, that becomes a facilitator for 20 more things like this that could happen, but we wouldn't have to be figuring it out ourselves. We'd have a friend in the city with expertise in this area with a network of 20 congregations or more. So far, just so you know, St. Peter was the first to commit to this out of that seed money. Some of that's what's going towards helping the initial funding. We've been able to identify up to $100,000 of annual funding from these 20 congregations going towards helping start Link Chicago. And our district, I'm on the board of directors for our district as well. They're very excited about seeing this happen. And so, not in the way I originally envisioned, but in another way that God had planned, there's a great deal of energy and excitement around helping start new ministries throughout the city of Chicago. And St. Peter, we are part of getting that started, launching that. Okay? All right. Yes, Bob and Jackie. Yep, sorry. Go, Jackie. Go first.
That neighborhood is an older neighborhood. Are the surrounding homes more elderly people, or are there enough young couples in the area to support
Yep, great question. So our initial demographic studies, we have a 10 and 10 team that includes Mike Graff from the board, Brad Rickstalis, a former chairman of the board who has expertise is in marketing and data research, Melissa Smith, former board member, currently a faculty member at Concordia Chicago in early childhood. She's on that team as well, helping providing guidance and wisdom as we plan out Trinity in particular and 10 and 10 more broadly. So from our studying so far, it appears that the community has enough young families that would support a small to medium-sized early childhood program. It's not going to be anything like what we have here, but it might be 4 or 5 classrooms, so it might be 60, 80 children, and that would be kind of the target size, and I think the community would support it based on what we've seen so far. Yep, good question. Bob?
You answered the first question.
Yep.
The second question is, we had a pastor come out from a neighboring church.
Yes.
Last summer, I believe.
Dave McGinley from Trinity and Galewood. Yep.
Which wasn't that far away from this.
1 mile south. Yep.
What other facilities are in the area that would be so-called competing with what we're trying to do here?
There are not many other church preschools around that are doing well. There may be a few that I don't know about. So in terms of among our friends, there's not really any directly there. Trinity and Galewood does not have an early childhood program, for example, so they're a mile away, but it's not a competitor. The competitors we're seeing are primarily home-based child care programs, and then a few like storefront ones that exist. But our sense is that there would be a need and a market for an academically rich kind of school-based early childhood program that could meet the community need there. So, yeah, Jason from our live stream audience.
Yeah, we have one question. Will the congregation be affirming a decision that was already made by the board with regards to Mead, or is this something the congregation would be voting on too?
Yeah, good question. The congregation would be asked to approve accepting the offer of the property from Trinity. The board has already looked through this and has vetted it and is bringing it to the congregation for their approval. Right, so we've not officially said yes. I'm sorry, I should be looking at the not you, but that. We've not officially said yes. We've said we're going to take it to our congregation to affirm, right? And then it'll be up to the congregation to decide. If the congregation says no, then we have to come back and say, okay, well, we've got to figure out why. And then does something else need to change for them to feel able to say yes? Right? But our hope and our prayer would be the congregation would say, this is what we've been planning for and preparing for, and it's a little bit risky. We all know that. But we think that's what God's calling us to do, and let's try it. Steve?
So if they're gonna give us the property
Yep.
for nothing,
Correct.
and we have ownership of it,
Yep.
just like this building,
Yes.
so 2 years from now, if we decide to sell that property and take the cash from a developer,
Yeah.
we could do that.
Yes. So the question is, would we own the facilities outright and then have the authority to sell them if and ever we should so choose to do so?
And then choose what to do with the money
Correct.
in our own congregation?
Correct. So what we're saying is that the facilities would be entirely ours, and we would choose to do what we want with them. And what we're saying is, here's what our initial plans are. If for some reason, 5 years from now, we try it and it doesn't work, we have every right to take the building, sell it, and then reinvest that money however we as a ministry choose to do so. What I have said, this is just out of my own authority for whatever that amounts to, is my hope and our intent would not be to take that and use it to pave a parking lot in Arlington Heights, right?
That's not what I mean.
Okay, I don't know, but I just want to make sure we're all really clear on that. So what our intent would be is if it doesn't work for whatever reason, if there's a big problem with the building, or if the community's like, no, we're not interested in childcare, or whatever, we would commit to any dollars that come from property that's given to us by city congregations would stay in the city of Chicago. Right? So that would be what I would ask you as the congregation to affirm to and say is this is not for St. Peter to get out of it, but it's for us to be able to be part of a greater work across the region. Yeah, Mike?
It's important to note, as I understand, there's absolutely no debt on this property at all. So we're
Yep.
getting a piece of property, a church, a nice facility with no debt. These 4 ladies have been working tirelessly for the last I don't know how many years.
Yep.
Trying to keep this facility clean, and they've done a great job.
So what Mike was saying, chairman of our board, is he's been down there a few times. The building's in remarkably good shape for the size of the congregation. There is, to our knowledge, no debts, obligations, or anything outstanding on it. Everything is current. So we will triple check that before we sign the lines. Yeah, so we'll triple check that before we sign anything. But everything looks clean and looks ready to go. So let me just say it's 1:07, and y'all are awesome. But there's a couple other stuff we want to get to. So quickly wrap up a couple more questions, and then we'll roll. Yep.
You're gonna have a basically empty building with people coming and
Yep.
going. You're gonna be investing money.
Yep.
On the dock, obviously,
Yep.
also. So I was wondering what you're doing for security day and night
Yep.
when we're not down there and the neighborhood knows it's basically an empty building.
Yeah. So the question is, what about security, empty building? There already is a camera security watching system in place. We'll make sure that's good or better, moving forward. What we'd also love to do is start planning activities and presence in that. It might be after-school mentoring with the local public school or the park district. It might be, the property is adjacent to Reese Park. There might be some community outreach events we would plan there. So the goal would be not to have it sitting empty for 12 months waiting for DCFS. We do other stuff. I'd love to have the Link Chicago office based out of there, at least to start, because that would keep activity going. And there is an Oromo Ethiopian congregation that's emerging that we've been in contact with initially, that I've invited to, assuming it all goes forward and they want to, start worshiping there too. So there could be Sunday morning and weekday activity aside from the child care side of things that could get started pretty quickly. So that's how I would hope to address the presence and the security concerns. Yeah, Bob?
I would ask the board to consider an exit plan. In other words, 5 years, 7 years,
Yep.
whatever it might be. And it doesn't have to be set in stone, but if it turns out to be a hole in the water we're just pouring money into, that we need to know that this is what we have
Yep.
planned, and at that point, you gotta pull the plug.
Yep.
I mean, somebody else failed here.
Yeah.
And we know that, and I'm sure they worked very hard to make a successful congregation. And we need to know that, okay, this is, we'll give it an effort, but there's got to be an exit plan in place.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion, so noted. Thank you. Yeah, Ed?
Yeah, I've been involved in some of these type of transactions, and there are a lot of times where the attorneys, you know, when it comes to closing and
Yep.
transfer and title and everything, but they'll put in the agreements that it needs to stay a religious organization or it needs to remain, you know, they're giving it to you free of charge, but
Yep.
there are certain stipulations that they put into that. I would totally expect whoever from our congregation, attorneys, et cetera, to review all that information and not get us into a quagmire
Stuck,
where
yeah.
we would not be able to do anything with this because agreements have been signed.
Yep, yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Mike is an attorney and has reviewed the documents that are in form currently. There's an initial donation agreement that they have signed as a congregation. We also have an attorney who specializes in this area. Her name is Janet Johnson. She's a member at Trinity in Lisle, which has done this with a congregation in Galewood, which is now Trinity Galewood. That's the one you talked about who came and preached here, Dave McGinley. And she did all the legal work for them in that transfer. She is doing that for us pro bono in this as well. So she's currently on vacation right now. And so when she gets back tomorrow, we're going to be feeding her documents and next steps. And so that's one thing we'll make sure is there. Yeah. I would not imagine, given the people who are giving it to us, that they're even thinking that. So I think we probably won't have to worry too much about it, but that's good to know. Yeah.
One other question I have, what kind of human resources are we going to be supplying them with from St. Peter here in order to get this off the ground? Brian, do you have time to do that with your current schedule? We need to bring in additional help.
Good question. Yeah, so the question is what sort of additional support and staff time is needed to get this started? As Micah mentioned, we have the volunteer kind of task force that's giving some of their time toward this. We would envision some of our time, some of Jim Thomas's time up front being needed to help set things up and get it going. But then our vision is to hire people on the ground there that are going to be the ones running it and keeping it going. So the $2,000 a month is specifically the facility, so insurance, security, maintenance, utilities, of all that. So once we actually get things going there and have other paid staff, that number would increase, but that'll all be built into the business plan. So we are mindful of just our time, you know, Jim's time, other people, how much time they actually have. We don't want to be unrealistic in that way either, so good question.
Is there a business plan that's already been put together that we could review? Have you put a financial together?
There's an initial conceptual one, yeah. So, yep, we were going to have a slide with just round summary numbers, which we just dictated here. So we'll work on getting that. It's like a one-pager initially that we can get available either on Sunday or on our website, so anyone who wants to review it can. Yeah, Jason?
Included in that is there an appraisal of the property?
That'll be part of our due diligence, yep. Okay.
I have one.
Yes, Gene, go.
Most positive thing I've heard is that you're saying something about Ethiopian people.
Yep.
Are they moving into the area?
They're already here.
But I mean, they have a future. They are going to be doing something positive.
Yep.
I mean, they have a plan for themselves.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know.
So so the Eritrean, sorry, this one is the Oromo, thank you, Ethiopian immigrant population already exists in several major U.S. cities, and they find each other and they network and they have pastors already among them. And so what we are doing is starting a conversation with one of them to say, we have connections in Chicago, you need a place to meet. The downside, somebody said, street parking only and not a parking lot. There's nothing we can do about that. It's all built out residentially around it. So that one may or may not be the right spot for them to meet. But we would love to be able to help facilitate an emerging church getting started. We're not paying their salaries. We're not paying them anything. If anything, we'd be giving them space below market rates to be able to get started. But that's a conversation we're pursuing.
Just asking you, are they Christian?
Yes, Lutheran.
Ethiopian?
Lutheran. Yep, in partnership with the LCMS.
Because if you listen to the news media,
Yeah,
you would not vote for this.
yeah.
I mean, am I the only one that's gonna say this here? I mean, what? It's a safety factor.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody getting killed there for this congregation is gonna be an issue. I'm sorry to bring this up, but I mean, isn't somebody thinking about this?
The,
Only one?
no, I don't know if you're the only one. Thanks for naming it. So the neighborhood itself, we have looked at the crime and the risk statistics for the Belmont Cragen neighborhood. And from what we've gathered, crime happens everywhere, including violent crime, but it seems like among the CPD, Chicago Police Department, it doesn't originate in that neighborhood. Sometimes it spills over into that neighborhood, but it doesn't originate there, okay? And so what that means is there risk? Yes. Is it the riskiest environment in Chicago? Not by a long shot, okay? The Aromo Lutherans that are looking for a place to meet and do church, I would not have any concerns with as a, immigrant minority group in this community. So, but that remains to be seen if they're ready and where they would actually want to meet, okay? Yeah, good stuff. I love you guys, by the way. Asking good questions, being nice, not mobbing me and tackling me to the ground for such a crazy idea. But yeah, thanks. Yeah, but just it would be a monumental thing. Let me just say this, friends, for this church to say we are serious about thinking beyond just us and having a broader impact on the kingdom and being willing to actually put some skin into the game and see that actually happen without it ever coming back to Arlington Heights and to us. We're saying this is because we're part of something broader, okay? And I know that's in your hearts, right? Yep, we do that. Yeah.
Not like we're not doing it.
But doing that here in Chicago and in the surrounding community, the fact that we already are and are talking about it is getting attention, and people are saying, wow, this congregation, there's something special about these people that are willing to start a little church body in South Africa. I shouldn't say little, yes. Its own independent, And then one of the questions always people have asked me is, well, we do that in South Africa, why don't we do that here? Right? And not just in Arlington Heights, but in between here and there. And so that's what we're saying, is we're filling in between here and there, right? And it's a beautiful thing. So thank you. The last thing, I'm not going to go into too great a depth now, just for the sake of time, is something we're calling the One Church Initiative. Also out of the conversations that emerge from these kind of talks, there are a handful of other suburban Lutheran congregations, all much smaller than ours, all of which are within a 5-mile-ish drive radius of ours, who have been meeting together, their pastors and their lay leadership, to say, what if we found a way to share staffing, time, energy, resources, because everyone's all trying to do the same thing independently. And it's been exciting to see God opening doors in hearts and minds in ways that haven't happened before. And so what I'm saying is, out of this, we anticipate that at least one, if not 2 or 3 or more of these congregations would form a unique collaborative relationship with us that could involve shared human resources, accounting, facilities management, ministry, pastoral staffing. We're not sure what the limit is yet, but what we're saying is there's these churches, all of them much smaller than St. Peter, who are struggling to have a pastor, keep a pastor, manage their books, figure out how to do human resources and payroll. And we've got a pretty well-defined system and machine and engine, you might say, to do some of that. So we're looking for how do we gain efficiency and share with them. But not just stop at shared costs and shared staffing, but say, what if we shared a single vision for ministry here in this suburban community that would bring our churches together, not in the form of a merger. They would all maintain their independent and distinct identity, but where we would act as if we were, like Jesus prayed, one church, united in him, as he and the Father are one. And so what it could entail is you hearing and seeing us collectively start doing things together more intentionally with a few of the churches around us. In my wildest dreams, which have not yet been realized but might be, a few of them might, for a season, come over here and join us for worship and Bible study and community life, so that we can get to know them and they get to know us, and we could share the things that are working well in our places, and then we could go help them go back to their neighborhood and community and start something fresh there with fresh energy, fresh support, and with this connection. If it works well, everyone saves money also, because we're sharing vital staffing and ministry support resources. And so the leadership of these congregations is very interested in this. The degree to which we enter into such a bold and courageous partnership remains to be seen. So that's in the works, hopefully more to come in the year. So One Church Initiative you'll be hearing more about. So what I'm saying is we might have 3 out of our 10 within the first 3 years. So just saying, right? God's up to some really good stuff, and it's an exciting time. But no action required from the congregation, just to let you know that that's a conversation that's going on. The churches, just in case you're wondering, Grace Lutheran Church in Northbrook, currently without a pastor, they're the most into this, and something with them will happen. So it just remains to be seen what. Living Christ on the north side of Arlington Heights, Our Redeemer in Prospect Heights over on Palatine and Schoenbeck, Faith Lutheran Church on the south side of the tracks, and a small one you probably don't even really know much about, Cross and Crown Lutheran Church on Rand Road, which is technically an independent Lutheran church. Cross and Faith are in conversations about becoming one congregation. So we're talking with all of them to say, what if we actually lived and acted and behaved like we were one church and not a bunch of them, competing for the same people and resources and that kind of thing. So, all right, I'm going to jump over to the financial update, and Mike and I are going to hand out a document. Brian's going to start walking us through it.
I'll just add briefly while they do that, I'm really excited about these 10 and 10 initiatives, and partly because if we can figure these things out, if we can figure out how to revive a ministry that failed in the city, if we can figure out how to help and support and come together with some struggling suburban churches, I think both of those could be models that could be replicated around the city, around the whole country. So those are really exciting things on the horizon. I want to share a little bit about where we're at this fiscal year as we wind up this June going into July when the new fiscal year starts, and then we'll share more about our budget that we have proposed for next year. So looking at our forecast for this year, we're forecasting a deficit before depreciation of about $60,000. There's still a few variables that could move positively and help us bring that number more towards zero, so we're hopeful for that. One of those is strong giving. So we're tracking just a little bit behind budgeted giving for the year. We had a great year end as far as giving, and then another great Easter. Both of those things caught us back up to about being on budget with our giving, and now we're just tracking a little bit behind. So strong giving from you all, from the rest of our congregation, can help us close this year on budget. As I mentioned, a few variables, some healthcare costs, some facilities repairs that may or may not happen could still move us in a positive direction toward the end of the year. Our scholarship fund, now with the change to variable tuition in our school, a different way that we assist families who need it, now there'll be a Saints annual fund. So if you had given to the scholarship fund, you may see this new logo around. It basically is accomplishing the same thing. It's helping families that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford an education here at St. Peter, but we're just branding it, packaging it a little bit differently. So that's the Saints annual fund. We are in a stable cash position for this summer. In some previous years, we've had to access lines of credit or take out loans to help get us through the summer until tuition comes back in September. But due to just our situation this year, we're in a stable position where we're not needing to do that. So that's great news. And then I want to mention our St. Peter Lutheran Foundation. It's been a great 2 years, and the grants that the foundation has been able to give toward our ministry has been a huge benefit. And so I want to highlight quickly just a few of those things that it's supported. So in the last 2 years, we've been able to grant about $900,000 towards ministry here at St. Peter. Some of those things that it's gone toward is our school, so kind of over and above programming, initiatives, staffing through the Lau Round Fund, about $300,000 through that. We've been able to address some classroom flooring issues, bring in new furniture, add new fans, lighting in the classrooms, and just really upgrade those spaces for our students. So $75,000 has been granted toward that purpose. School marketing, we've been able to get our name out there, promote things like variable tuition, bring in new families that may have not heard of us before, and that's thanks to some funds from our foundation. Scholarships, as I mentioned, $61,000. Currently this year, there's 76 students receiving some sort of financial assistance to attend our school. So there's a huge need there, and part of that has been met through the foundation. Security upgrades, we had a generous member donation that was then matched by the foundation toward this. And as you probably noticed, we have some new systems and operations around the facility that are helping keep everyone that comes in our building more safe and secure. So we're thankful for that. Over in the Life Center, some worship upgrades have happened. So we've brought in additional lighting, a new light board, more speakers, and then the window shades, which allow us to have the room go in either direction that we need it to. Some exterior improvements, we added a shed for storage, and then some new landscaping projects to help beautify the campus as well. We've started a building fund, so just putting aside some cash reserves for when repairs come up, and so the foundation has helped us get a good start on that. Operational funding, so a little over a year ago, we created the operational endowment, and what that does is set aside funds that are invested with no restriction on it. So the earnings from that fund can be used on an annual basis to just support ministry and help us have a third stream of revenue that we didn't have before to support the church and the school. So that fund is at about $1.5 million. Most of that has come through estate gifts and planned giving that has come as people have passed. And we've gotten $52,000 of revenue from that just in 2018-19.
So let me just point out, sometimes when we go through the budget cycle in years past, there's been a struggle. Hey, wait a minute, don't we have those endowments and that foundation with all that money? Why can't we use it over here? And listening to that and kind of reflecting on the opportunities that were before us, we said, let's create a new operational endowment fund. The principle of it is not permanently restricted. Okay, so it could be used. The intent of the fund is to provide ongoing operation support. So to diversify, so it's not all based on tithes and offerings and tuition, to kind of just be able to expand what we can do and support it more broadly. What we do is we benchmark the principle of the fund every June 30th, and 5% of whatever that number is the guaranteed amount we can build into our budget for the next year. And at least that much, whether from principal or earnings, hopefully it would be from earnings, but even if it's a bad year, it can be from principal, would be built into our operating plan, our budget for the year. Our intent is to build this up to $2.5 million as aggressively as we can. So as estate gifts and bequests and other gifts come into the foundation, if it's undesignated, that's where it goes. If it's designated, it goes where it's designated. And we built it from 0 to 1.5 million in about 12 or 15 months, which is just a remarkable thing. Yeah, Bob?
What about the required minimum distributions that a lot of people who have 401ks
Yep.
and IRA accounts are required to take after they're 70 and a half years old? Some of those come to the church. Do those go into the foundation, or are those put into just the regular?
You want to answer that one?
So there's a benchmark that's been created. Any gift of $25,000 or above that comes in passes through our foundation. So then the foundation board can decide where exactly that goes if it's undesignated. But that's kind of our benchmark right now, is anything $25,000 or more goes through the foundation.
And then anything less than that would be considered a regular contribution and would go into our general contributions line item that you see in the document. Sometimes someone says, I want to give an even bigger number in whatever fashion to the regular contributions. So if they indicate that to us, then we count it as a regular offering. But if it's undesignated and it's above 25,000 and they don't tell us otherwise, it goes to the foundation. Okay. Yeah, Steve?
What's the principal balance of that Lao Ron fund?
The Lao Ron Fund sits at and remains and will not change, probably, around about 2.7 million. Right, correct? And the church endowment was at 1.2 or 1.9 million? Okay. And then this one at 1.5. So altogether, we're sitting at a little over $5.5 million in the foundation under its management. It's been doing really well, as you've seen in 2 years, giving out about $1 million in grants. I say the Lauron Fund probably will never go down. We have actually changed the policy so that every year 5% of the principal of that fund becomes unrestricted permanently, and it becomes restricted by the foundation board. So what that means is that at some point in time, should we collectively decide to spend some of that money on something school-specific, even the principal, we could choose to do that. And then over the course of 20 years, it would shift from being permanently restricted for forever to board restricted, which means we don't spend it, but we could.
When did that 20 years start?
3 years ago, maybe, or so. Something like that, yeah. So now we don't intend to spend that principal down, but we may get to a point where we say, hey, we really need to do this in our school, because that's what the gift is for.
Very restricted.
Correct. So we've been able to untightly, or less tightly restrict it, and that's through the fund itself named a governor, you might say, or someone to oversee its distribution. It was originally family members. By the way, if you're ever thinking about doing this, don't do this. Just saying, okay? Because it creates a headache for a bunch of people down the line. So it was originally a family member that needed to sign off on any expenses. That transferred to Helene Bartz, and before she passed away, it transferred to Gary Grome, who was chairman at the time. And so now he no longer serves in a board role, but he serves as the caretaker, you might say, of the distribution of the fund. And so anytime we need a grant from that fund, we check with him to make sure it's within the guidelines and approvals.
Who's next to follow Gary in case
Currently it's Brad Rickstalis is the next named successor. And the intent would be sometime we'll probably name the foundation board itself, but we just haven't got to that point yet. So good questions.
All right, we've also been able to help some South Africa construction that's happened to the tune of $80,000. 10 and 10 seed money, which has been mentioned, almost $200,000 set aside just for those purposes, and that will not and has not been used for anything else. Our National Youth Gathering, we have 25 people going to that, 21 students this summer, and the foundation was able to help support some of the lodging, transportation, leader fees to help us do that. Staff continuing education, so 3 of our staff members here have gone on to pursue master's degrees in education and ministry, and there's a specific fund within the foundation that is able to support that and help those individuals receive further education. PLI was a leadership training that we brought here and hosted here at St. Peter this year. 4 of our own staff were able to attend and just really be blessed by growing in their leadership, understanding their leadership better, and how to apply that to our ministry. So your planned gifts, our congregation's planned gifts, as you can see, help ministry for years and generations to come, and we thank you for that.
And as you know, Ray Pagels is our gift planning counselor. His services cost you nothing, but they are quite a value to the ministry, and that would be to help you think through how do you set up your estate plans to be as generous as you can be to those you love and to ministries that you want to support. And so if you haven't already met with Ray, please consider doing that. He's very nice, and he's not high pressure. And what he does is he helps you articulate what God has already put in your heart to do. And maybe think of some things you didn't realize you could do. So, there you go, Ray.
So what you see on the sheet in front of you gives the last 2 fiscal years, how we wound up, those actual numbers, and then this current fiscal year's budget versus forecast, and then the far right column shows you the 2019-20 budget that we're proposing at the voters' meeting this Sunday. So to go through some of those numbers just briefly, looking at the forecast, again, I mentioned tithes and offerings. With some strong giving, we can close on budget. Tuition and fees, we're pretty much on budget, just tracking a little bit behind of what we budgeted. Extended care and summer programs, as we mentioned, our summer camp has record numbers of enrollment, and that comes with some great revenue as well. So in that area, we've seen some over and above revenue that we budgeted. Scholarships, we're tracking a little bit behind. There'll still be some opportunities to give toward that in this fiscal year if you're interested in that. And then the Applied Foundation grants. Some of those grants that I mentioned actually show up in the budget if they're covering things that we had already planned to do or that were budgeted within our plan. Looking at the expense side of this fiscal year, a few things to point out. We obviously did not end up hiring the full-time pastor yet. And so that came with some savings in the salaries and benefits for our church. On the school side, there was a few positions that we needed to invest in, increase due to enrollment. There was also some healthcare costs increase that were unexpected, so that's why that number was above budget. Same thing on the ministry support side. We hired a director of communications, which has really helped us in a number of areas, but that was an additional investment that we made in this year. On the school side, there was some unforeseen technology expenses that come up, and you hear us talk about that within the capital campaign that is coming up. We'd love to address some of those more major issues so that there's not these things coming up every year that we're having to deal with that are over and above budget. So all of that on the expense side for this fiscal year led us to about $100,000 more than what we had budgeted, leading to that bottom line number of about $60,000 of a deficit before depreciation. But again, we hope that that moves in a positive direction between now and the end of June.
And if you guys recall from previous years, most times in this time of year, we're looking at a little bit of red ink, and most years we find ways to reduce spending or increase revenues and finish in the black. I think all but 1 year during the time I've been lead pastor, we've been able to do that. And so we're hopeful, even with that projection, to beat it. Okay.
So as you notice, when you look at your sheet, in the 16-17 actuals and 17-18 actuals, we were able to finish with a net surplus before depreciation in both of those years. So I want to preface that as we talk about this coming year's budget. Talking with the board and leadership, we have decided to put forward a deficit budget for this coming year of about $98,000 before depreciation. As we talked about it, we decided that this was a year to invest in ministry and not necessarily to cut back. So as we looked at all of the positive things that are happening, all the good things in the pipeline, the enrollment being strong, a new school principal and leadership coming in and everything that comes with that, we looked at how could we get to a balanced budget. It would mean cutting positions, people, programs, and we felt like the effects of doing that would outweigh the negative effects of proposing a budget deficit like this. And again, we're hopeful that through 1920, we can outperform in some areas income, we can save some areas in expenses and beat this number, but this is where we landed when we decided on the budget we were going to propose. So like I mentioned, we do have strong enrollment in tuition coming in for next year. We're well ahead of where we were this time last year. Some of that is just better enrollment processes and getting people signed up earlier, but some of it is new students, kindergarten going into first. We've made a strong push to get a lot of those families signed up for first grade so that they can experience what it's like here and hopefully want to continue on. So we've added some incentives and some personalized outreach to those families, and that's went well. We do have a second full-time pastor included in next year's budget. When we looked at the timeline of that, we decided to include it for 9 months, so starting in October, just based on where we're at in the process, the names we received or not received to this point, we felt like that was a realistic target by the time we're able to get someone and have them start. So we did include that in the budget, but only for 9 months.
We're waiting for the district to give us back a list of candidates that our committee can review and then proceed forward with interviews, which would be conducted over the summer months. So you'll hear more about the opportunity to call another pastor later in the summer. So that's why we're picking that time frame. So
there is a 9% healthcare cost increase that's estimated. That's something that we just continue to look at closely, look at some other solutions that in the future we can pursue, because that's just an area, as you probably all know, that continues to increase in cost and be a burden on our ministry. But we are able to provide a great plan to our staff, and that's one of the benefits with not being able to pay what we would love to provide them with a great healthcare plan as well. And then we were able to provide a 2% cost of living increase to all of our staff and employees for this next fiscal year as well. Yeah.
Because you had operating surpluses the last 2 fiscal years that you're showing there, about $150,000, was also part of your thought process of proposing a deficit budget to be able to use some of those cash reserves that you built up, or have those cash reserves been used someplace else?
Good question. And that's the reason I wanted to point out where we ended up in those 2 years is it's not like we're coming into this crisis situation or it's an area where we're proposing a deficit budget and feel like we're going to be in major trouble. because of how we finished the last few years, we feel like we're in a spot to absorb that, to handle it. Like I mentioned, this summer, we're not having to take out any loans or lines of credit. So to your point, we are in a position where we feel like the benefit of investing in ministry, especially with the new principal coming in, leaving the school structure as is for a year, and then maybe we can look deeper into that, was the right way to go. And so the cash reserves and the position that we're in allow us to propose this.
And all of you who have been around for a few decades, you know that for a while, the custom or the rhythm was lots of red ink and then very, very difficult staffing cuts and reductions. We feel good that in recent years, we've reduced red ink significantly and just exercised more discipline. We're proposing this expecting to outperform it. But we didn't want to put unrealistic numbers onto a page and then not be able to meet them. So we said, here's reality. This is where we could end up, but we think we can do better than this, and we'll do everything we can to make that red ink number the smallest it can be, short of significant staff cuts and reductions. Part of that was a new principal coming on board next year and the school being the major employment center of our operations. So if you look at the salary and benefits there, it's $3 million in personnel as opposed to less than half of that in the rest of what happens. And so we didn't want to give a new principal that kind of problem day one, right? There'll be other problems. There always are stuff that you can work on. But so that'll allow us a little more flexibility as he comes in. He and his wife move in, as I said, at the end of this month, and you'll start to see them in June. And so I look at this and say, I don't ever want to have to do this again, but we might. Some years, there's just unique years. And I think we're in a position to be able to absorb it if we do have a loss even 2 years in a row. I think we're okay. But it's not something we're going to want to do after that. And that's what the board, we came into the board with proposals for balanced budgets because that's what our policies require. And the board said, we don't want you to do that because it would cost too much to the overall ministry. And so we'd rather, take on this element of risk and try to beat it. So a little bit unusual, but I think it's okay.
So then just quickly diving into a few numbers within the budget for next year, we're budgeting just a slight increase in tithes and offerings. So again, strong giving will be required from our congregation to meet that budget need. Tuition and fees, like I mentioned, strong enrollment, so we're seeing an increase there, and we could even see that number go higher based on how things come in the next couple months. Other income is fundraising, facility usage, and so we're continuing to increase those numbers. And then the foundation applied grants, again, is a huge benefit to our ministry. On the expense side, we do have the pastor position in there. Some of my time is just shifted over toward the church as I focus on discipleship. So that's why you see that number go up more dramatically. And then on the school side, again, just healthcare benefits and the cost of living increase is the majority of that increase in the salary and benefits there. So any other questions on the budget or finances in general?
Awesome. You guys have been very gracious with your time, and it's been very helpful to us as we refine our thinking and our conversation. So hopefully when we come to the voters meeting on Sunday, we're not going to have to go into as much depth. But as you know, sometimes a bunch of people show up that didn't come to any of the town halls, and so we'll repeat some of it. You can ask the same questions if you want, but I just ask you not to ask all of the same questions again on top of all the other ones too. So just do what you need to do. But our hope would be that we'd be able to be in and out in 90 minutes or less on Sunday. Hopefully it'll be a time where we celebrate the great things God has done. We get excited about what's coming up, and we take some steps forward in faith and trust that God will provide, and then get to work. Okay? Let me close this. We'll all join together in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. All right, thanks, friends. We'll see you guys on Sunday, if not before.